Okay, hey everyone. We are super excited to have Dr. Nicolette Cagle and Rebecca Hoeffler here with us tonight. Dr. Cagle is a dedicated naturalist, ecologist, and environmental educator in Duke's Nicholas School for the Environment. As an NSOE lecturer, her courses emphasize natural history and environmental education and communication. She is also the director of the NSOE Undergraduate Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, director of the Environmental Science Summer Program at Duke, and director of the NSOE Communication Studio. And Rebecca Hoeffler is the program coordinator for Duke's Office of Sustainability and supervisor of the Duke Green Devil student program. She is a consistent and supportive voice for sustainability on campus, and she has recently been working with Duke and Durham to create environmental justice programming. Becky, you want to take it away?
Awesome. Thank you, Ashley. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to join you here tonight to talk about some opportunities for sustainability engagement with Sustainable Duke, but also off campus, to talk a little bit about how you can get involved, not only in the Durham community, but just steps you can take for community advocacy in whatever town you're living in or wherever you do go after Duke. So just to get us all on the same page and talk a little bit about what is sustainability, just so we all can have that common definition, because it is such a broad field that I do like to just solidify things with the definition of meeting the needs of current users without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. This is taken from the 1989 United Nations Brundtland Report, when sustainable development was defined for the first time. And so sustainable practices support environmental, economic, and community health. And what's really important when we talk about justice issues for any audience is that if it's a sustainability issue, it will be one that covers the environment, economy, and community. So each one of those aspects has to be included in the solution for it to be sustainable. If not, it will just exist within the sphere of environment, economy, or community. It's really important that all three of those pillars are taken into consideration when you have a sustainable practice. You'll most likely hear this commonly used as people, planet, profit. It is what corporations and industries like to term it as. So that's just a common way to hear it as well. So for Duke's Climate Action Plan, we have a commitment to become carbon neutral by 2024, and that does involve the Durham community, which is really wonderful. Carbon neutrality means that the university will have a net zero carbon emission, but it's achieved through reduction strategies and carbon offsets. So I will talk a little bit about carbon offsets and how those provide some environmental, economic, and social benefits to the Durham community. So for who Sustainable Duke is, we are the Office of Sustainability at Duke University. If you have not heard about us before, we are really here to help create that roadmap to carbon neutrality, to ensure that we're on track and meeting all of our goals. We do have a broad mission to educate and empower the Duke community to create a more sustainable future through those three pillars that I spoke about: social, economic, and environmental change on our campus and beyond. It is really important to acknowledge that we have some of the most wonderful future leaders of the planet at our university. So we want to make sure to train our students to tackle the present and future challenges of climate change, both while they are at Duke and then afterwards in their careers and lives. So part of our office comprises of the Duke Carbon Offsets Initiative. Something that's really wonderful about DCOI is that they are the only university-based offset group in the entire country. No other school or college has their own office that's tasked with creating carbon offset projects to compensate for their emissions. So they help us meet that carbon neutrality goal through developing and implementing our strategy for identifying, creating, and purchasing carbon offsets. They also help to provide carbon offsets that are educational and provide hands-on learning opportunities for Duke students, staff, and faculty. And again, so just really focusing on what is that definition? What are we talking about? So for carbon offset, this means that it's the reduction or removal of 1 metric ton of carbon or equivalent greenhouse gas emissions used to counterbalance the emissions in other areas. So we are basically working, when we talk about carbon offsets, the removal of 1 metric ton from the atmosphere to compensate from excess emissions from another entity. It just happens to be that we are that other entity as an internal process. So some of the programs that qualify as a carbon offset project include things like wetland restoration, so really prioritizing ecosystem services, since wetlands are a really beautiful form of a carbon sink. Energy efficiency programs for staff to help reduce their energy bill by creating more efficient homes and processes for them. Urban forestry, which I'm going to talk about in a little bit more detail in the next slide. Animal to waste energy, so converting, utilizing the ability of methane as it's pooled in CAFOs and actually burning that off as carbon dioxide counts as a carbon offset because we're reducing the potency of methane by turning it into carbon. And then renewable energy on campus and off campus where possible. So talking a little bit about that sustainability intersection and making sure that the actions that Duke takes towards its carbon neutrality goal really has the Durham and Duke and North Carolina community in mind. What's interesting is that we could have been carbon neutral a decade ago. Back in 2007, when we signed the American College and University President's climate commitment to tackle climate change on our campus, we could have purchased renewable energy credits. We could have written a check and gotten those credits to be carbon neutral. But it was really important for Duke to ensure that if we were going to spend money on carbon offsets, if we were going to put time and energy towards this mission, that it benefited Durham and North Carolina specifically. So really thinking about that place-based actions and how the actions that you take where you are benefit all and not just some. So one of the great examples of a carbon offset project that has these intersections is urban forestry. And it's important because the way that the plantings were informed, the location of these trees in Durham were based off of a GIS study at the Nicholas School of the Environment, off of a master's project done by a student who actually analyzed tree coverage and tree canopy in Durham and found that lower socioeconomic neighborhoods actually did not have as much tree canopy as the wealthier neighborhoods did. So this turned into both a social, economic, and environmental justice issue. Because when you plant trees in these communities, you have that three-pillar solution. The environmental benefit being that trees absorb greenhouse gas emissions, trees absorb greenhouse gases. The health benefit being cleaner air and mental health benefits. I'm not sure how many of you planted a tree, maybe when you were in middle school. I know I did when I was in 3rd grade, and every time I go home to my hometown in New Jersey, I see that tree and I think, that's my tree. And I have such pride in that spot and pride in that place because I know that I planted that tree when I was young. And then the economic benefit is actually that property values increase with more tree canopy. If you're ever walking around Durham and you get to explore the different neighborhoods, I want you to check out Forest Hill Heights because that neighborhood has exceptional tree coverage. It has exceptionally wide streets and sidewalk access, so it's very, very walkable. And so trees and walkability in a neighborhood is really reflective of the privilege seen in that community. Another aspect of our office is the Duke Campus Farm. So the Duke Campus Farm is a 1-acre working educational facility about 4 miles away from Duke's campus right now. And the food that's grown there is grown in a sustainable fashion. They practice organic practices, and they also help to provide food to not only Duke's dining hall, but they actually usually run a community-supported agriculture program. And if you haven't heard of a CSA, it's a wonderful sort of alternative economic theory that helps to provide economic stability for local farmers. So you actually pay the farmer up front at the beginning of the season for a share of the crop throughout that growing season. This year, they have diverted that program to help feed Durham residents during COVID. So they have partnered with Root Causes, which is a medical school group that practices something called a vegetable prescription program. So they actually help to identify food insecure patients, and the Duke Campus Farm provides produce to those patients. They do have a larger mission of fixing the food system in Durham, and the Duke Campus Farm helps to provide conversations around food advocacy and food justice in Durham. They provide curricular and co-curricular opportunities, workshops. You can actually see their produce in the dining halls. They should be labeled from time to time if you're looking for a local source of produce. Another example of the sustainability efforts taken on campus to help be a better neighbor to the city of Durham is the water conservation measures. So back in 2007, Durham experienced a really severe drought. And this drought put a lot of pressure on people to practice water conservation efforts, even though in reality, the #1 customer of potable water in the city of Durham was Duke and the hospital. And so there was a lot of conversation about how can Duke kind of lessen the pressure on the municipal water system so that regular citizens didn't have to practice such severe conservation measures because of our use of their water. So the Duke Reclamation Pond was completed in 2015, and it collects water, runoff water, from about 265 acres on West Campus. Behind Gross Hall is where this is located on Science Drive. It also has a 1 mile looping, a 1 mile loop that you can walk. So it's a wonderful recreation pond. It holds about 100 million gallons of water. The water is used directly in the chilled water plant that's located next door, and the chilled water plant system on campus provides the cool air and cool water to, I think, about 74 buildings using one centralized piping service. So it's a really great example of how to use campus as a lab to show that there are sustainable practices and behaviors that large entities like universities can implement to lessen the pressure on municipal systems to be a better neighbor. And something else that's really nice, just interesting, is that facilities, when they were creating this project, worked with the biology department to select native trees, shrubs, and over 40 different species of those native herbaceous plants. And it provides a wildlife habitat, as well as provides filtration of rainwater and runoff, and it makes it drought resistant. So it's something that is really a wonderful example of a sustainability practice and project on Duke's campus. So when we talk about sustainability in those three spheres, for some who are not into this subject, it can be hard to see how sustainability and something like economy are related. So when we talk about a sustainable economy, we're talking about an economy that prioritizes sustainable growth for all, something that prioritizes the true cost of energy, protecting natural resources, actually valuing the real cost of an ecosystem service, like that wetland that I mentioned before. So wetland has an ecosystem service. It provides us with filtered water. It provides us with a place that can absorb the surge from storms, which will help protect infrastructure and protect the lives of people. So it's just an example of how these intersections are really related to the health of people and the habitat we live in, basically our planet. And it's a really wonderful way to dive in and think about all the different aspects of sustainability. This is why I mentioned that sustainability is so broad, because it covers all these different aspects, all these different facets of our society. And it's a really wonderful, wonderful realm to get into because it relates to so many different realms and facets of the world that we live in. Something that is really important, I think, is the society and sustainability aspect of this. So when we talk about things like food security, environmental education, safe housing and transportation, that's all really the society sphere of sustainability. Something else to consider is the academic connection. So if you are a student and you want to learn more about sustainability, you technically don't even have to take a class labeled as sustainability. Sustainability relates to a lot of different academic offerings here at Duke. And something I'm really into is the economic side of sustainability. So you could take classes that have financial analysis, maybe something like life cycle analysis, or the actual cost of a product throughout its entire lifespan, talking about sustainable growth, responsible investment opportunities, equity, and then policies that govern growth and development in public policy, which is really wonderful. So that would be things like, how do you actually create a zoning map that reflects the reality of climate change effects? So would you not develop in places that are going to expect to see rising sea levels to help protect community health and infrastructure? Another example of ways to get involved on campus is through the Green Devils internship. So the Green Devils, they're committed to helping students become sustainability leaders, so kind of elevating the mission of Sustainable Duke to connect them with hands-on sustainability opportunities and mentorship opportunities from graduate students, professors, and professionals. We have moved to an online program during this COVID reality. And so I'm going to tell you a little bit about what that looks like. So the Green Devil program, the internship actually created a new program for first-year students. We are celebrating the first-year students as the class of 2024 because they are the class of carbon neutrality. They will graduate the year Duke goes carbon neutral. And so we want to prepare them for that. So we have a three-phase sustainability literacy program. They are actually just a few days away from completing phase 1, which was our community onboarding phase. So they promoted cohort bonding. So of these 30 students, they are broken out into different cohorts so that they have a more personal experience with the upper level Green Devil students and get them engaged on campus. They learned about broad sustainability paradigms and definitions and Duke sustainability specific initiatives. In the next phase, in the next semester, they'll take a deep dive into sustainability topics with peer learning opportunities from Duke experts as well as external resources. So we have 7 themes in this: environment, economy, public health, environmental and social justice, just among the few. And then the third phase is they're going to be more of a little bit of a hands-on approach. So they're going to practice what they've learned in either a research proposal or a project proposal for campus or the Durham community that they'll present for Earth Day on April 22nd, 2021. And just another example of how to get involved academically, the Duke University Undergraduate Sustainability Engagement Certificate is a really great way to do some hands-on engagement with sustainability. So you can actually pick your own theme and intersections. So someone like Sarah Snyder, who graduated last year, had an interest in sustainable agriculture and food justice. So she did work not only at the Duke campus farm, but in the Green Devil internship program for Duke Dining. And so she did her food systems theme through the engagement certificate. And then Ashna was also another certificate student who graduated. She had a bit of a different theme that's still related to sustainability. It was majoring in economics, and her sustainability engagement certificate, she also had a minor in environmental science and policy. Why? Because she believes energy, entrepreneurship, and innovation are the 3 most important things to combat climate change and work towards global development of a human-centric future. So you can see how sustainability, which may have been typically thought of as just environmental, is really focused around the person. A way I like to describe it is that sustainability helps to design systems around people, not the profit. However, you can keep profit in mind because that's an economic as well as social well-being issue. So if you do want to take a certificate, if you want to get a certificate here, the class, The Theory and Practice of Sustainability, it's Environ 245. It's being offered this spring. And it's actually listed on the service learning page of the academic offerings. This is because you are actually acting as a client to a person on campus. So you actually get to engage with sustainability in person to help someone on campus who needs something solved. So last year I was on the hospital and sustainability team, and the year before I was on the dorm and sustainability team for this class, and it was really wonderful. Other ways to get involved. As a Duke student, I need to let you all know you are the most sustainable power on the planet. When you take care of yourself, your mind, your body, you wake up every single day with the incredible power to create change in your community. So never doubt yourself or your ability to create change. If you want to learn about opportunities to get engaged in Durham, you can go on the Duke Office of Durham and Community Affairs. They actually have an entire volunteer page option. You can also learn about the different Duke student groups that are service oriented. And so I really, really encourage you to check out this office and their offerings because you can probably find something that you're really passionate about to help make change. And then talking more on the personal level of what I do for civic engagement that Duke does support, I work a lot with the city of Durham for environmental and sustainability education. This was all due to my grandfather, who was mayor of my town. So I did want to give him a little shout out. He was wonderful in helping me understand that a citizen has not only the ability, but the right to create public policy solutions within their municipality, township, or city, or state, or country. And so one of the ways I got involved was actually by failing to cross this crosswalk with my 2 baby brothers who are featured here. So this was because this intersection is extremely busy and people kept making a right on red, and I was in the middle of the intersection and almost got hit with them. And so I went home in my post-college angst and started a petition for my town to support something that's called the Complete Streets Policy. And this policy actually helps to inform the planning department of that community that when they are making changes to the roadway or doing any construction, that they should actually accommodate for all modes of transportation. This was really important because there's obviously an environmental aspect to getting people out of their car and getting them to walk or bike because you clean the air. You improve the health of that person, not only physically, but monetarily by reducing their dependency on an automobile, which is very costly. And then the economic aspect is that when you have a township that's more walkable, you have a higher engagement in the township's actual economy. So if you want to get someone into a downtown shop, give them convenient parking or a pathway to get there through walking or biking. When I asked my grandfather, who was on the township council at this point, why I kept seeing mom and pop shops in my town close, he gave me the wildest answer. He said, lack of convenient parking, and I did not believe him. So he explained that people would much rather drive 5 to 10 minutes to Walmart or Target and get that perceived lower price item, but have that free and available parking spot waiting for them. They would rather not drive around town looking for a parking spot that they might not even get, but then have to pay for. And that really helped me understand that the sustainability framing of public policies can help solve a lot of solutions. The equity issue that was solved here was when I was tabling at my town fair. And a woman came over to me and she said, my husband and I have been waiting for this for a decade. Let me go get him. Rather naively, I was standing there waiting for someone to come over eye level and approach me by walking. And he came over in his wheelchair. His family explained to me that not once in the 10 years that they had lived in my community, that they had been able to go on the sidewalk on a summer evening to a restaurant without the handicap accessible vehicle. They were never able to go downtown and find a pathway that was safe for them because our sidewalks in our town were not all ADA compliant. And so he and his wheelchair were never able to participate in that form of transportation by taking himself downtown on safe and even and ADA compliant sidewalks, because our built environment is not built for everyone. So equity and ADA compliancy and all these ability level issues should be taken into consideration when you look around your environment. Another way that I get engaged in our community is with the Durham Housing Authority. Marcus Clark here on the left is the new Director of Resident Services. And I've been working with 2 of the DHA properties, which is the Durham Housing Authority, to build engagement and education gardens. So this site here located is Price Steel. It's in North Durham. And this group is a senior citizen community. The reason that they want a garden is because they are lonely. And in COVID, they are experiencing a lot of isolation. There's also a lot of food insecurity in these places. So by building them a garden, which we've gotten approval for, and Neighborhood Improvement Services is buying the beds for, that they're going to be able to be outside in a safe place because it's much safer for them to organize and be outside than inside. And they're going to be able to engage in growing food. And for a senior, this has a lot of health impacts, not only cognitively because they're able to use their skills to remember old skills. So they may have gardened when they were younger and not have had the opportunity for a long time. It also helps them to build new skills, which is outrageously important at this age for something like deterring Alzheimer's and that effect. The physical ability of them to participate is because we got ADA compliant garden beds. So again, making sure that that you're designing things for your audience is really important, and to make sure that it's inclusive, not exclusive. We're also talking a little bit about sustainable building practices. So one thing that I'm really excited about is trying to launch the Living Building Challenge here in Durham, hopefully with the affordable housing option. So the Living Building Challenge is a really wonderful framework for building. It basically, and this is going to sound odd, it basically builds within the frameworks of a flower. So it has 7 petals, and those petals all reflect how a flower would operate, and how do you translate that operation to a building. Well, the building, when it's designed, uses all the available water it needs within the space it takes up. It uses all the available sunlight it needs within the space it takes up. It's also, in a way, biodegradable because you can actually build it modularly and take it apart to be reused. That's a really big component of sustainable building, is to use it to make sure that your buildings are reusable. And so I'm trying to hopefully bring that framework into the ways that we build affordable housing here in Durham. If not all of it, at least some of those petals, because the most important petal, in my opinion, is biophilic design, where you actually bring nature from the outside inside to the building to help improve the health of the occupant, not to degrade the health of the occupant, which a lot of older buildings do. And so there's a lot of alternative building techniques, alternative planning techniques, all these sustainable options that you can utilize as a member of the public in the public planning of the community that you live in. And I highly, highly recommend you get engaged. Pull the Leslie Nope, get involved in your local township, get excited about community engagement, because it really is all about community here on out. As we try to tackle these larger climate change issues, it really boils down to how we relate to each other as people. If you would like to stay informed, just some options, you can email sustainability@duke.edu. I have a weekly newsletter that goes out on most Mondays. We have a monthly newsletter. We have a Facebook and an Instagram, and you are welcome to email me. My email is rebecca.hoeffler@duke.edu, or you can email sustainability@duke.edu. If that's a little easier to remember, I can respond to that as well.
That was awesome, Becky. Thank you so much for sharing all of the resources and talking more about your involvement with the community. So we'll be able to do a Q&A at the end, but I want to make sure we get to everything. Was there anything else you wanted to add before we switch over to Dr. Cagle? Okay, thank you again, Dr. Cagle. The floor is yours.
Great, thank you so much, Ashley. I want to kind of think about some of the things that Becky was telling us. Think about environmental justice, and then tie that to a few initiatives that the Nicholas School of the Environment is working on right now. When I think about environmental justice, there are a couple core principles that I rely on in my environmental justice practice, as my individual practice. One of those core principles is that environmental justice allows for the self-determination of all people. So this is a fundamental right to political, economic, cultural, and environmental self-determination. The second principle of environmental justice that kind of girds the discipline that is really important to me is this idea that everyone can participate as equal partners at every level of decision making. So this decision making includes things like needs, community needs, assessment, planning, implementation, enforcement, evaluation. And when we look at a big institution situated in the United States, particularly in the southeastern part of the United States, like Duke, we see that there are principles of environmental justice that possibly are fundamentally at odds with the hierarchical nature of an institution like Duke University. So what does that mean for environmental justice and our university? To me, it means that there's a lot of work that needs to be done, that I can't do all that work. And so what do we do about it, right? Essentially, the proposal of the three initiatives I'm going to talk about derives from the idea that Duke has resources, has a lot of resources. Duke has power. We're situated in this hierarchy. We're situated pretty high up in this social hierarchy. And what we can do right now at this moment in history is utilize those resources to advance community needs. So the three programs that I want to talk about, I want to make it clear that they are all born from community needs. They're not born from a bunch of professors or staff or deans sitting in a room saying, okay, what do we do about this? So the first program that I want to talk about is the DEEP Collaborative. So DEEP Collaborative is diversity and equity in environmental programs, and it brings together local community organizations and also some university-led initiatives that address diversity, equity, and inclusion have K-12 and greater education, and the environment. And the purpose of the collaborative is to facilitate the development and growth of environmental focused diversity and inclusion programs in the Triangle, and also to identify potential areas of overlap and partnership. And a critical goal of DEEP is to build the capacity of environmental organizations to understand the local and global context of environmental injustice in relation to race, ethnicity, gender, sexual orientation, socioeconomic status, ability, and other features of identity that might be missing. So the DEEP Collaborative essentially provides a means for community members to meet, share, and exchange ideas regularly. It also provides a place for all these organizations locally. So there's at least 35 to 50 organizations involved in DEEP regularly. It provides a way for organizations to say, this is what our needs are. Can you help using your Duke resources? Can you help bring things together? So I'll give you a couple examples. When we first launched DEEP in 2017, the community said, we need a network analysis. We need to see how we're all connected and who kind of are the hub organizations in the community and how we can work together more efficiently. So we thought about this, and we were able to develop a master's project that provided this network and landscape analysis that we were able to present to the community. And it's actually making change. So one of the things that we found is that there are a few hub organizations among environmental organizations in Durham. The university is one, but it's a diffuse hub, so it's kind of confusing because while we say like Duke University is a hub, it's not just one person or one office, it's like all these people that don't even know what they're doing kind of working in Duke. Another hub organization was Keep Durham Beautiful. This was news to Keep Durham Beautiful. They had no idea that they were so tightly integrated and holding together the entire community. You know, it's like spokes on the wheel. They were the hub and they were connecting all these organizations to each other. Well, for Keep Durham Beautiful, this revelation was really powerful, and they are working to step up their efforts to do things that hub organizations do best, which is help with collaboration, help with funding, help organize events. So we were able to use the university almost as like a shell structure to provide space for community members to do this work. The other thing that we did with the DEEP Collaborative is ask if people need training. And people did want training. These organizations, again, at the intersection of diversity, equity, and inclusion in Durham and Chapel Hill, and also in the environment, wanted lots of training. So we've done a whole bunch of workshops. One of our most interesting workshops for me was a field trip to historic Stagville. So historic Stagville is a large plantation, historic plantation in the north part of Durham. It was one of the largest sites of slavery in our state. Historic Stagville is also located right next to a fairly new nature preserve, and that land that the plantation was on is part of the nature preserve, Horton Grove. It's run by Triangle Land Conservancy. So in the workshop that we did at Historic Stagville, essentially we asked the state representative at Stagville to give us a specialized tour, particularly focused on race and environment. And then afterwards, the Triangle Land Conservancy took us to their property and talked about these issues, talked about environmental issues through the lens of race and environment as well. After that, right, it's not just about getting knowledge, right? So when we think about learning and action, just gaining knowledge is never quite enough, and that's not participatory, and it doesn't actually meet some of these fundamental principles of environmental justice. So instead, we need people to be able to talk, collaborate, process together, and that's what we do. So after every field trip, we have a big luncheon, and we just talk, collaborate, process. We've been able to do other work of this nature. We took a trip to Greensboro where we visited the Civil Rights Museum. It was extremely powerful. We've been able to post resources, and our next initiative is a series of 4 workshops on racial equity and the environment that we're starting in January. And so they'll be for up to 100 members of the community. We again, so this is done with a consultant, Paul James, who used to be in OIE. That workshop would normally cost money, right? For people to attend, it could cost $40 to $100 per person. We were able essentially to subsidize that work. The Nicholas School is funding it, and then Burt's Bees has actually agreed to fund a little bit of it too, which is fantastic. So we kind of got this community partnership going on. So this is an example of one of the ways that Duke can actually leverage this power structure to help meet community needs. Okay, so that's deep. Then the other program that I wanted to talk about was the Environmental Science Summer Program. So the Environmental Science Summer Program was born of needs of community members for increased STEM and college preparation education for marginalized students. So the Environmental Science Summer Program essentially cultivates environmental leaders in our own community. It provides this real world experience. It has a real focus on career path preparation. And one of the things that I want to talk about here is that it's not a pipeline program. So we often see education initiatives and their STEM pipelines. And essentially the idea is, in my conception of a pipeline, right, is that you drop a student in and you say, this is your path. This is the path we want you to take, and we want you to end up here. We want you to be an environmental science major doing environmental science, right? Especially if you're going to be in something like the Environmental Science Summer Program at Duke. That is not the philosophy of this program, because that is putting an outside structure on other people. So the philosophy of this program is to respond to students' needs. At best, maybe not at best, but another way of thinking about it is a pathway program, that students can take whatever meandering path and end up wherever they want, but they now have tools that can help them get wherever they choose to go, wherever they think their community might benefit. So part of the curriculum of this program is to do some pretty intensive environmental justice curriculum with high school students, racial equity training with high school students, looking at issues in our own community, particularly ones that they bring up, but also water quality issues. So for me, the Environmental Science Summer Program is something I get excited to do and be a part of every year. Because it's kind of this foundational approach. And then the other thing that I want to talk about that the Nicholas School is working on is the NSOE, so Nicholas School of the Environment, Career and Academic Innovation Research Network of Scholars program. This is the Cairns program. So you know Cairns are like those little rocks, right, that you stack up, and they provide direction, or if you're not sure where you are on the path, you can use it as a way marker. So that's what it is, NSOE Cairns. And essentially, this program will provide vertically integrated opportunities for Nicholas School undergraduates to develop academic skills and career readiness, but particularly it offers social support needed for students from a diversity of backgrounds to have meaningful, valuable, and successful experiences in the Nicholas School or at Duke in general. So it's not going to be limited to Nicholas School students. This was born of some work that Becky was involved in, because I had 2 Green Devils working with me to develop a strategic plan for the Nicholas School. And when we did this plan, we did a series of focus groups of undergraduates. So there were 2 undergraduate Green Devils leading these focus groups. And this is what we kept hearing over and over again: this need for social support, this need for community. So, so that's something that we're working on right now that I'm pretty excited about. I think I'll stop there. There's so many things going on. Like we have this cool thing at the Marine Lab where they had been doing some STEM outreach in the county surrounding the Marine Lab. And you know, after the hurricanes with COVID, when they were working with the schools, the people are like, you know what, we don't need STEM right now. What we really need is resiliency. We need to be able to support ourselves emotionally and socially. And so the Nicholas School, really through the efforts of a colleague of mine, Liz DeMattia, is supporting training of resiliency mentors. So we've got like 25 graduate students. They're being trained in how to be a resiliency mentor, so then they can mentor students all around Carteret County in resiliency and actually meet the needs that the community expressed rather than the agenda that we often push as a university. Oh. I think I'll stop there. I could talk all night about this stuff.
That was great. I want to make sure that we have time to answer everyone's questions. So right now I see a question from Annie about what advice y'all have for new grads who'll be moving to new cities about how to get involved with local initiatives, especially sustainability, climate, or environmental work.
My first advice. So in our culture in the United States, in the dominant culture of the United States, white supremacy culture, we often have this urge to act, right? To just dive into action without reflection, without learning. So my first advice would be to get involved in the community, but sit and listen and see what issues are arising, what you become passionate about, and where your skills are most needed. So I would attend community meetings. I would go to places where people are vocalizing their concerns and needs. I'd sit in different advocacy group meetings and listen for a while, for months, before deciding where and how to act.
And just to add on to especially that sentiment about learning about the place you're living, we have a lot of, I think, habit of coming in as academics to places and saying, you know, this is what you need to solve this issue. But like Nicki says, really that might not be the issue the community wants solved. And so it is really important to kind of live in the place and learn about the place and then reflect on the actions you would like to take if they're supporting the goals of the community. Making sure that you're elevating voices that may be marginalized in the conversation, making sure that you're supporting that work. In order to find out what these community organizations are, all you have to do is Google it. So basically go onto Google, type in the township that you're living in, and then type in community organizations. So there's two different aspects. You could do community organizations, which are those advocacy groups that organize. You could also do municipal township committees, which are organized by the township, where you could actually go and sit on appointed committees or join as a volunteer. And so there's kind of two different realms that you can take with that.
I just want to add that looking at those municipal committees and attending some of those committee meetings can be just extraordinarily eye-opening if you haven't had the opportunity to do it. It's eye-opening in terms of the way that local government works, and it's also eye-opening in terms of the issues that community members really find important and salient.
I just pasted, oh, I didn't send. So the Durham Environmental Affairs Board is a good one to get started with in Durham, at least. It's just a good example of how a lot of different stakeholders can work together on a committee. So they have meetings. Also, it's wonderful to take up the adaptive ways that we are communicating now in COVID. Township committees and policy discussions are far more accessible now because they're all being on Zoom. And so township input is more because it doesn't matter if you can make it to the meeting, if you can find parking, or if you're stuck in traffic. Because if you can access the internet, which is a privilege in and of itself, you can participate or watch a recording later on.
Getting involved with local government isn't something that we've talked a ton about so far, so I really appreciate y'all bringing that up. Before I move on to the next question, did you have something to add, Dr. Cagle? You look lit up on my screen.
I saw Cameron's question in the chat box.
Okay, awesome. I'll just read that out to make sure everybody knows what the question is. But one theme that has come up in our conversations about environmental justice has been the need for a complete overhaul of the system. The idea that change will come from outside of the system rather from within. As people working toward environmentalism and environmental justice from within, do you have any thoughts on this philosophy or how to overcome the occasional feelings of hopelessness or helplessness when dealing with these large systematic issues?
So when I read this question, immediate corollary that came to mind was climate change. When we started thinking about climate change and people's perspectives, there was a lot of hopelessness in scientific communities, advocacy communities, because people weren't understanding the issues, people weren't taking action the way that people in these different groups thought that people should take action around climate change. And a lot of research has gone into thinking about how to overcome those feelings of helplessness and hopelessness that comes when you have these really big, broad, systemic, interconnected problems that need those same interconnected solutions. And what the research came up with is two things. One, focus on values. Think about why you do this work. What is the core value that really motivates you? Whether that be stewardship or protecting the environment for the future, or whatever that might be, to create a thriving place for life on Earth, including human life. So keep your eye on the goal. That helps us. The second is develop community. So when we work together in small communities, we can support each other. That interconnectedness can help us be resilient and can help us overcome these feelings of hopelessness and helplessness. It's a steady path. It's hard work, right? Changing anything from the inside is hard. Changing anything from the outside is hard. Change is hard, but it's worth it. So we gotta keep pushing on.
And just some thoughts, because the hopelessness issue, I mean, that is just something I dealt with a lot, especially my mid-20s, when I was going through some pretty severe depression and anxiety issues. And so one of the things that is really helpful is to remember that sustaining yourself is honestly more important than sustaining the environment or other people. Because if you can't sustain yourself, then you can't sustain these other systems. Resiliency is not about running out your battery, it's actually about how you restore your energy. So prioritizing your well-being means that you're going to prioritize the well-being of others because you're better able, you have more energy to take care of people you care about or issues that you want to solve. And some of the systemic issues in tackling those is, I'm a firm believer that if individuals can collectively cause global problems, individuals can collectively solve global problems. That does not take away from the responsibility of those few industries that are the major sources of greenhouse gas emissions. But if that doesn't absolve their responsibility, it doesn't absolve our responsibility to act as well. And so one of the things is talking about solutions. I rarely talk about problems. I really talk more about how we can provide solutions to problems that we suffer from. So talking about things like circular economies and how that helps to support job growth and economic resiliency in your community, something about localized currencies, all these theories and ideas that we don't talk about on a day-to-day basis, bring those up at the dinner table, bring them up at holidays. when someone wants to talk about the problem, you pivot, talk about the solution to that problem, especially when it is very person focused, when you focus on the well-being of the person, the well-being of the economy, and leave out maybe that framework of the environment, you're going to bring a lot more people because, again, with the value thing that Nicki had talked about, reflecting on the values of others and framing your discussion to what their values are can really help to open up the conversation. And I feel like in this day and time, we don't talk to each other as much because we're scared of having those conversations. So not being afraid to talk about the issues because you're talking about the solutions is a way better approach for that. Yeah, it's incredible, to be honest. I love it.
I can ask the next question. It's a little convoluted, so hopefully I can explain it a little bit better. So something that like I know I've been thinking about, and like I've had conversations like within like our classes, and also with like Ashley and Cameron, just to sort of we like discuss how to like even go about like organizing this course, is this idea that like a lot of sort of these like diversity, equity, and inclusion like acts and like committees and things like that are sort of a way for the university or like other institutions not to, you know, like put the blame on one, because, you know, it is something that happens, I think, everywhere. Is a way for them to say that they're, you know, like thinking of these like radical changes within sort of the circumstances and situation of the universe rather than actually like doing things. So like one of the examples that we discussed is Darian from NASA, the Native American Student Alliance, I think is the organization, came in to speak with us about sort of the work that they've been doing, and also just sort of the activism that's been happening within Indigenous communities, which is incredible and amazing, and they're doing a lot of great work. But one thing that's really like stuck out to me, and like I know I bring this up all the time, but it's just so really boggled my mind when she mentioned this, is that rather than sort of just like writing a land acknowledgement, which is like very straightforward, and I'm sure this research has been done over and time again, like these are facts, right? Like this is not like contested, like this is history. And that they're like, they created a committee to look into the potential like writing of a land acknowledgement, which is just like mind-boggling. And this happens a lot, right? Like even with like divestment and stuff like that. And I see that you all have things to say, so I will pause. So yeah, just like wanted to hear your thoughts on that, and like how to sort of prevent from being bogged down by administration and the sort of like bureaucracy that's like meant to sort of defeat us.
So this land acknowledgement thing has been an issue that I've been involved with, because I wrote a land acknowledgement, you know, for my classes, for my syllabus. And then I started teaching these culturally inclusive pedagogy workshops for Nicholas School faculty. And one of the recommendations for culturally inclusive pedagogy is to include a land acknowledgement. And so I was going to present and be like, okay, here's an example land acknowledgement. Here are the 6 things that are normally in a land acknowledgement. And when I went to do this, somebody, I won't name names, but somebody higher above me was like, wait, you can't just use your land acknowledgement. It's not been vetted or done it, you know. And so then I went, I was talking to people in the Lumbee tribe, and then I actually reached out. I was pointed to this committee, right, that you're talking about, the land acknowledgement committee. And you know what they did? They read my land acknowledgement, and they're just like, thumbs up. So my advice about this bogged down mentality in the committee work, I don't know how to get out of it. I'm part of this bureaucracy. I'm on tons of committees. Some things go super slow. But you know what else I do? Sometimes I just do things. I just say, you know what? We said we're going to start a mentoring program. I'm going to start it now. You know what? We need land acknowledgements. I'm going to write one. Anyone that wants to, you can use it. Will it bite me? Does it bite me in the butt sometimes? Yeah, sometimes. And I just gotta keep moving forward. There's nothing else you can do. So honestly, for me, because the committee work, like the institutional bogged downiness, there is purpose there, right? That's bringing voices together, other perspectives together. There is good things that come out of that work. But also, you know, we also need to be brave and do what we can and what's in our power, and act in the way that our heart, morals, education, worldview, whatever says that we should act.
not sure I can add anything of total value to this, because Nicki is just so cool. And so just take her words, that because that's just wonderful. I guess the only thing I can do is just acknowledge that, like, just keep swimming, like just keep playing that in your head when you're bogged down by this, because you will get somewhere eventually. It might be kind of cool to think about, if you're working within a system and you want to change it, I would definitely do a little bit of dive into systems thinking, so that you can see how all the different components of the system interact, and maybe where there's some places it could be more efficient. Because if it is an issue of efficiency and getting thoughts heard and conversations to be had, then there stands to reason that you could make those systems more efficient and just eliminate some of the bureaucratic, like, bogged downness of these systems. So systems thinking is maybe a good place to start when you want to make something more efficient.
Thank you so much. That was great.
Does anybody else want to pipe in with any questions before we wrap up? Feel free to just unmute yourself. All right. Well, if anybody does have any questions, we can pass along both of our speakers' emails. I see Zoe just put a link to a resource in the chat that everybody should check out. But I really appreciate both of you coming to speak with us tonight. I honestly think this was a really great way to wrap up the course, because a lot of our discussions can get very depressing and discouraging. And I feel a lot more optimistic and positive after hearing both of your perspectives. So thank you so much.
Thank you for having us and for organizing a phenomenal house course. Congratulations to y'all for putting this together, because I know so many students benefited from the lessons that you all provided. So thank you all for being you.
Ditto what Becky said. Thank you.
All righty. Well, thanks again. I hope everybody has a great night.